Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Pearson International Higher Education Forum 2021. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's sessions and you're ready for another day of learning and inspiration. My name is Paul Vesties and I have the privilege to be your host for the coming sessions. If you feel like, put in the chat box the name of your institution and the city where you're based. It is always nice to see where people are from in this virtual room. We've got subscribers from over 40 countries in Europe, so yeah, this can be interesting. So yeah, have a look at the chat box, put the name of your institution and the city where you're based before we start. The core question of this forum is: how do higher education institutions continue to stay relevant, to adapt to an ever-evolving world, and to address the requirements of modern students as future professionals and world international citizens? And in the next few hours, we'll try to answer this question by the use of 5 sessions about employability. Employability refers to the attributes of an individual that make him or her able to gain and maintain employment. And needless to say, that's a pretty important topic in today's world. Now, we'll start the day with an opening keynote by Dr. Angus McDonald, followed by a session by Professor Zvi Segal about how universities can help students to identify what motivates them, the professions that match their motivation, and the skills they need to develop in order to access these professions. After this, we'll welcome Wyn Davies, who will provide a session about the importance of critical thinking, after which we'll welcome Angus back for a session about the importance of self-awareness for employability. And we'll close the employability part of the day with a session by Brigitte Hughes about Pearson for Work, which is a solution that bridges the gap between education and employment, and it has recently successfully been implemented in Italy. If you see in other sessions that you haven't subscribed for yet, please visit the event's website where you can subscribe. I think it's also in the chat box. You can click the link. And please note that for each session, it takes place in a different Zoom event. So you need to dial in for each session separately. So make sure after the session you close this call and you log in for the next one. You can find the correct links for each session in the confirmation email that you have received with all sessions you subscribed for. So have a look on your mailbox again if you want to see the links. And feel free to insert any questions about this session in the chat box. And by the end of each presentation, we'll take a few minutes to answer a few of them. If you'd like to get in touch with us after the session, so if you have any specific questions, you can do this by sending an email to this email address, ihef@pearson.com, and the organization committee will then forward your question to the right Pearson colleague or team and get back to you. That's it. I'd like to very much welcome the first speaker, which is Dr. Angus McDonald. Angus is an expert in objective assessments for organizational selection, education, and career development, and is actually one of our most trusted partners. He has developed over 30 psychometric tests, including tests of ability, personality, motivation, interest, and judgments, as well as assessments exercises for many roles. And in this keynote, Angus will be sharing his thoughts about the importance of employability skills and will provide you an overview of the soft skills that are essential for career success, both now and in the future, as well as how to measure them via assessments. Over to you, Angus.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. So good morning, everyone. And Paul, thank you very much for that great introduction and for setting the scene for today. I'd like to start the first session of the day by looking at the world of work that our students will shortly be entering into. Obviously, the world of work around us is changing immensely. We know this, we see it all the time, and recent events have probably only accelerated those changes. Careers now and in the near future are going to look very different probably from the careers that we're having, and certainly the careers that the generation or two before had. So I want to look at some of these changes, some of the ways in which the world of work is changing, some of the drivers behind this. And from this, start to look at some of the challenges that our students are going to face, and then how we might prepare them for that. So the first half of my talk will be about setting this scene looking at what's happening, what's likely to happen in the near future and maybe slightly further ahead. And in the second half, I want to introduce a solution from Pearson that has been developed to help students reflect and develop their employability skills. So hopefully everyone's all right and can hear me and see me. Yeah, good. Okay, so let's make a start. Here we are, it's 2021. And here are our students. Now they might be just embarking on an academic career in higher education. They may be coming towards the end of it. They may be very much thinking about the careers and what they're going to do in a little while, or they may not, because we know that people will be at very different stages of their career journey. But if we think the average retirement age in Europe is a little bit under 65 now, because of the aging workforce, there's increasing pressures in lots of countries to extend the retirement age. It's not unreasonable to think that our students are probably going to have about 40 years of careers ahead of them. So this is a long time. This is a major part of their adult life. And if we think to what 2061 might look like in terms of the world of work, that's probably very difficult to do because we've seen so many changes happen so rapidly. So that's this 40 years or so that the students have in front of them. They're going to be filled with lots of different things, probably lots of different things for them to do, lots of things for them to adapt to and respond to as the world of work around them changes significantly. As I said, we probably can't imagine what 2061 really looks like. But one way to think about change is to wind it back 40 years. So what did 1981 look like? And for those of you who don't remember, there's a reminder. 1981 looks a little bit like that if you wanted a mobile phone. When I was researching this topic, I came across lots of interesting facts and figures and ideas. And here's one that really struck me. So a report from 2018 with the World Economic Forum that said 65% of children entering primary school will end up doing jobs that don't even exist yet. Now, our students in higher education are obviously a little bit ahead of this, but the same principle applies. The challenge here is that in a way we are trying to think about how do we equip our students for what is the unknown, because we don't know what the world of work or jobs are going to look like. And a whole raft of new jobs will be created in that time. One of the key drivers behind this is obviously automation, something, again, we hear a lot about. The idea that technology can replace what humans do. Another graphic taken from the same World Economic Forum report. On this graphic, the countries that are shaded darker blue, they estimated have a greater potential for having work automated. The ones in grey, they didn't have sufficient data to make these projections about. And they estimated that between about 45 and low 50% of work in these countries could potentially be automated in the coming years. And this automation tends to be concentrated in countries that have the highest wages and the highest number of kind of workers. So that creates an interesting question about what happens to all of these people after their jobs are automated. The second slide is taken from a McKinsey report estimating the number of jobs that could be displaced by automation by 2030. So we have a very wide range, but also we have very vast numbers in some countries. So in China, they estimated 236 jobs could be displaced by automation by 2030. Important point here is this notion of displacement, because earlier we said that new jobs are being created. If jobs are being replaced by automation, then someone has to design that automation, operate that automation, maintain that automation. So as jobs are displaced, new jobs are created. But the challenge is to think about the extent to which there is a balance between jobs being displaced and jobs being created. And that's something we don't really know. It may be that because of displacement, the labour market becomes a lot more competitive. Nesta, the Innovation Foundation, 2017, published a report saying, well, actually, what are the drivers? What are the big changes in the workplace in the future? It's easy to put everything onto kind of technology and automation, but actually it's much broader than that. There's a whole load of things going on in the workplace. Automation is just one aspect of technological change, and technology is everywhere. But there are 6 other factors that they identify. Changing demographics of countries, particularly in terms of the age profiles that we're seeing that are varying quite considerably between different countries, have an impact. Globalization, something that started many decades ago, but is probably only picking up pace and is accelerated by technology, absolutely. Urbanization. So again, kind of changes in the spread of the workforce and how people can think about work. Increasing inequality maybe changes the kinds of work that we see in different areas of the country or different countries around the world. The environment is having a massive impact on how we think about work, what's seen as being kind of acceptable or unacceptable. Increasingly influencing the routes through which kind of finance is flowing as well. So the whole environmental agenda is probably only going to have a bigger impact on the world of work as we go on. And political uncertainty and change will have a big impact again on work, how it's done, and interact with all of these factors. Because none of these factors work independently, they all work together. And I think all this leads us to one certainty, which is there is no certainty about the future of world of work. Thinking about very recent events, a report published at the end of 2020 by Gartner, looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the workplace. So it's bang up to date in what their thinking is. And they identified 9 key changes, some of which were more relevant to employers than employees. So I focused on just the ones that are relevant to employees. The first, increase in remote working. Well, yes, we've seen this absolutely. We've seen a rapid push behind what was already kind of a steady flow towards more and more people working remotely. And whereas we have some industries now saying we want people back in the office, the vast majority of industries are thinking that work is not going to look like that in the future. People are going to be working far more from home, or indeed there's going to be no requirement for employees to come into or be office-based at all. And a number of major technology companies particularly have made announcements to that effect recently. Contingent worker, or the gig economy, is huge and is growing. And the current situation, Gartner estimates, is only going to increase and drive that forward. Very interesting thought is this separation from skills and roles. So the argument is that when we apply for a job, we apply for a role. Okay? That role will require us to have specific knowledge or skills, absolutely. But it is there to do a particular task. Now, the argument is that in the future, recruitment is going to be a lot more based around skills than roles. Organizations will need a problem fixed. They will need something to be done. And they will recruit people with specific skills to do that. And when they've done that, then maybe they will be disbanded, the team. And this links very much back to contingent worker, the gig economy, the idea that people are recruited for specific skills to fulfill a particular purpose or task, rather than to fulfill a role that requires a lot more kind of disparate skills or abilities. And the final thing that this report highlighted is that organizations are going to become more complicated. The pandemic is going to result in a big shake-up in organizations and business internationally. We're going to see a lot of businesses failing, or we have done. We're going to see mergers, acquisitions, people buying up bits. And this results in fewer larger, bigger, more complex organizations that employees are going to have to navigate their way around. So this leads up to this notion of employability. And how do we help our students, our young people, prepare for the challenges ahead? So here's one definition. As with all of these things, there are many definitions out there of employability, but it's quite broad. So it focuses on skills and knowledge, the kinds of things that our students are learning as they go through kind of higher education, but also around these kind of personal attributes. And that's very much what I want to move on to start to talk about now. What are some of these kind of attributes that parallel, if you like, the knowledge and skills that young people have that help them navigate the jobs market, help them be successful in the workplace and adapt to all of this change that we've just been talking about? So Pearson have looked at employability, and we have defined employability in terms of, should we say, kind of 4 buckets or broad kind of areas. The first of which are core academic competencies. So these are basic abilities in language, in mathematics, and increasingly important is digital fluency, because technology is everywhere and people need to be able to work effectively with that technology. And additionally, what runs through this is competence in typically kind of English language, because so much of the world of work is conducted using English language. Occupational competencies and knowledge, the specific skills and knowledge and understanding that people need to do a particular role. So what they need to be a teacher, what they need to be a nurse, what they need to be an engineer, for example. And then alongside those are what we term personal and social capabilities. So these personal and social capabilities are what are sometimes referred to as soft skills. These are skills that are relevant to all jobs in various combinations and help people, if you like, apply their academic competencies and apply their occupational competencies effectively. So this group is all about productivity. The last group is career knowledge and transition skills. So this is what I understand about the world of work. The knowledge that I have about the opportunities available and how I go about accessing those opportunities and how I go about making the transition. So this is all about job search, finding my way through this vast world of careers that is out there. The Pearson product that I now want to talk about, which is called the Future Skill Assessment, focuses on the personal and social capabilities largely. I think it also touches a bit on the career knowledge and certainly the transition skills element of that. But core academic competencies should largely be covered by the time we get to meet our students. Occupational competencies is really what a lot of higher education is all about, is about equipping students with these skills. But it's the personal and social capabilities that are probably overlooked or not given sufficient attention. So this is where the future skills solution comes in. So we talked about personal and social capabilities. So these are kind of general transferable skills. They are the skills that help me apply my knowledge, my work relevant competencies effectively. And we all need these, no matter what we're doing, no matter what careers we're in. We need them to be effective, and employers are saying they need them. Importantly, employers are saying, this is the stuff that we really need, but actually it's difficult to recruit for. So if you look at surveys of what employers are saying they're struggling to do, the knowledge-based stuff is not that difficult, but what they are struggling to do is to get the people who they can put in front of a client and who come across as credible, who can communicate, who can kind of think around problems. Collaboration is another one that we see time and time again as being really important. And the future skills model that we have has been based on going out and looking at these sorts of surveys, of talking to employers and saying, what is it? What is it that you really need in terms of these future skills, or what some people refer to as soft skills? And out of this work, we have defined 7 personal and social capabilities that are listed there. So the ability to think critically, and later today we have a talk by kind of Wyn Davies, who's going to talk specifically about critical thinking. Communication skills, collaboration, my ability to work readily and effectively with others constantly it seems really important by employers. The ability to be creative and flexible and adaptable to the tasks, to the workplace. My ability to lead, to direct, to coach, to nurture others seems very important, as is self-management. And I think self-management in this kind of post-COVID age is going to be more and more important. And one of the reasons I say that is I do some work with higher education, mentoring students, and one of the things we're looking at now is the idea that when they get their first job, they're not going to be sitting there probably in an office surrounded by peers and people who can mentor them and help them understand the work around them. They're going to probably be sitting at home in their spare room, in their bedroom, trying to do this work. So this idea that they can motivate and manage themselves at a distance is going to become an increasingly important skill in considering how we're going to be working in the future. And when we went out, we kind of talked to employers about this list and surveyed them. They say kind of 9 out of the 10 top skills they want to see in applicants are examples of future skills or soft skills. And again, here's another chart taken from a World Economic Forum report in 2020. It's pretty up to date, asking employers whether they think the relevance of certain skills was decreasing, as in the beige area, whether it was stable, the light blue, or whether it was increasing. And if we look at the ones that are increasing most, we have critical thinking and analysis, problem solving, self-management, working with people, and then technology use and development. So the kinds of soft skills are generally seen as being important by employers, difficult to get hold of, difficult to understand, not necessarily well developed in students, but of increasing importance to their workplace. So we have evidence coming in from many different sides saying, yep, these things are really important and we need to do something about them. And that really is what the future skill solution is all about. It's based around a series of psychometric assessments that have a very long history. And we brought them together as a package to provide a comprehensive assessment that looks at behavioural tendencies, so the typical way that I go about behaving or conducting myself, critical thinking, so how I think around problems, challenge ideas and concepts, and my verbal reasoning, which is related to understanding of language and my ability to use that to communicate effectively. And out of this, what we do is we use this package to help students think about, where am I in terms of these soft skills, to help them think about, what am I good at? Because students it's sometimes difficult for students with limited work experience to say, okay, outside of the core academic stuff that I'm doing or have done, what is it that I really shine at? What are my real strengths? So it helps them identify their strengths, but also potential gaps, areas they might want to focus on. So they think about their kind of future development, and through this, enhance their employability skills, get them to think about who they are as an individual and how that's going to work for them in terms of their chosen careers in the world of work. In terms of the specific assessments, on the left, we have 3 assessments. Watson-Glaser, third version, is the critical thinking appraisal. The DAT, differential aptitude test, verbal analogies, is a test of the ability to kind of understand and work with kind of complex lexical terms, feeds into communication skills. And then the Workstyle lens, which is an assessment of behavioural tendencies that feeds into several of these kind of future skills. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, showcase each of these assessments very briefly, but focus more on the output, what students actually kind of get at the end of this. So the Workstyle lens is a Pearson assessment that has been developed to assess behavioural tendencies, aspects of kind of personality. It's been around for some time, but last year we undertook a major revision of it. And it's aligned with the ONET database. Some of you may be familiar with ONET. It's the US Bureau of Labour's jobs database that contains very wide-ranging information about different kind of careers, the qualifications that are required from the opportunities, the types of motivations, skills, personality that tend to fit those careers. So it's a rich and deep resource that we've drawn on to help develop the Workstyles questionnaire. And as it's a modular system, we don't ask students to take all 16 of these. We just focus on the 9 styles or elements of the 16 that are most relevant for the future skills. So this is a fairly brief assessment. Sometimes students typically complete it in about 15 to 18 minutes. And here's an example of the output. So a key feature of the future skills assessment is that whenever students have completed the assessment, they are provided with an interpretation of their profile and what it says about them. So here we see an example for the Workstyle scale of achievement, and that's an aspect of kind of self-management. So at the beginning of the output, we explain to them, what does your score actually mean? So there's no, if you like, kind of technical terms and no psychometric terms or psychobabble in here. It's all about very plain language. It's designed for students to be able to take and to work with independently, not necessarily without any kind of facilitation. So we get an explanation of the score, and then we get an explanation of how you might choose to grow your skills. So what can you do? So this helps students think about setting goals and actions, easy things that they can start to engage in that will grow their soft skills and therefore their employability. So that's the Workstyle lens. The second of the assessment is a Watson-Glaser critical thinking appraisal, which is a very long-standing assessment of verbal critical thinking. So it actually traces its roots back to almost kind of 100 years ago. Obviously, it's been updated, very regularly updated. It's a big item bank of questions, and as with all of these assessments, they're all kind of internet kind of delivered. It is extensively used across the world for recruitment, for development, and also in academic settings as a tool to help select people onto kind of training courses. And we have a vast amount of data showing that actually kind of ability in critical thinking is a very good long-term predictor of how people will perform in various careers. And it's not a single measure. It takes a more comprehensive view of critical thinking. So actually the subtests within the critical thinking appraisal break down into 3 separate areas, which are recognize assumptions, evaluate arguments, and draw conclusions. So it will give to students a profile of their critical thinking. So it's not just about being strong or weak, it's about saying actually we might be strong in some areas, but less good in others. And again, here's an example from evaluate arguments section of the critical thinking appraisal. Simple text-based feedback that students can readily relate to, and on the basis of that, what can you do? Yeah. Some ideas, some developmental tips, and we're just showing kind of, obviously, we're not showing all of the potential content here, we're just showing examples of it. And the final assessment we measured, I mentioned, is the verbal analogies from a differential aptitude test. Again, it's a very long-standing kind of battery of tests that have been used in recruitment settings and also kind of career guidance settings for kind of many, many decades. And it measures this ability to understand the meaning and make connections between words, which feeds into our ability to understand communication and also our ability to communicate effectively ourselves. And again, developmental kind of feedback out of the differential aptitude test, the verbal kind of analogies section. And this feedback here is for someone who's done fairly well on the assessment. So this is quite kind of positive feedback in terms of identifying the strength for the student who's gone through this assessment. But no matter what they've done, we always say there's room for more. There's potential to kind of grow and stretch. So there's always tasks that we can give them to help them kind of develop further. All of these assessments are wrapped up in an online system that students take, and it's something that they can kind of access at will, take in their own time. They don't have to complete it all together, they can take it a bit at a time, and then they get the dashboard, and the dashboard kind of summarizes their results. So here's an example of what a dashboard might look like. So on the left-hand side, apologies on the text is a little small here, but on the left-hand side, we have our 7 future skills: leadership, collaboration, self-management, etc. And each of these areas is evaluated into 3 levels, shall we say, which are an opportunity for development, for further exploration, and a strength to leverage. So this compares how students have done relative to a peer group. And so the opportunity for development is the lower areas, the further exploration is the typical, and the strength to leverage is saying they've done kind of higher than the majority of their peer group. And some of these future skills we can also drill down to in more depth. So if we look at collaboration, self-management, and critical thinking, you can see little arrows beside them. And here's an example for collaboration. So if we click on that, we have an unfolding menu, because collaboration is formed of concern for others and cooperation. And it may be, it's not in the case shown here, but it may be that actually the facets, if you like, that make up collaboration are different. So one might be an opportunity for development, for example, but one might be higher. It might be kind of rated as further exploration, because it allows for this sort of kind of subtlety or nuance in the level of kind of exploration that we have, and the facets that students can kind of break down collaboration into, to think about it a little bit more deeply. And also it makes development a little bit more easy because we can focus on, for example, concern for others as a developmental task, or we can focus on cooperation. And this breaking development down into smaller, discrete chunks will typically make it easier for students to identify what they need to do something, and actually do something successfully to improve their soft skills. We looked earlier at on the slides examples of the output, but again, here's an example of, by clicking on some of the definitions, any of the definitions, they can see a narrative explanation of their score, and they can see some developmental suggestions. And finally, we have a number of training courses. So these are kind of training courses that are specifically mapped to the future skills. So these are training courses that have been designed to develop the students' soft skills. So for example, with collaboration, we have training module around teamwork, working with others, and we have a module around work ethics and building trust with ethics. So these are courses that students can enroll on and take themselves through to improve their future skills. So the assessment, if you like, is just a starting point. The whole assessment part of it is a way of benchmarking or baselining. Where am I in terms of these future skills? The other thing it does, it also gives students a language to start to talk about their skills to employers. So we talked earlier about employability and particularly kind of the transition skills. And I said some of these are relevant for the transition skills, because if I'm sat down in front of an employer and I have some understanding about my communication skills, about my creativity, about my leadership, for example, I have a language to talk about those. I've maybe gone through some tasks that maybe I've set myself in terms of developmental activities, or I've gone through some specific kind of training modules. This helps me put myself across in a strong way to employers, because it helps me as a student talk to them about the kinds of things that they are increasingly telling us are important for them. So to wrap up, absolutely, I think we've seen the change in the world of work is absolutely massive, and the rate of change is only going to be increasing. One of the reasons I think soft skills are so important, so valued by employers, is that they encompass the stuff that's uniquely human. Okay? Certain things can be automated very easily. Soft skills can't. So employers are increasingly focused on the things that machines find it hard to replicate. And so if we do this, if we think about the development of soft skills as something that's equally important to developing our students' kind of academic knowledge, then what we're going to do is we're going to be equipping them for career success, not just in the near term, but in terms of giving them skills and abilities that will take them throughout their career. And that's what I have to say for this morning. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Angus, for this very interesting presentation. We got a few questions. The first one I'd like to ask you is on behalf of Jens, who asked why you have excluded some of the 21st century skills in your list of 7 skills. And I'd like to add to that, are all these 7 skills equally important for all careers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, when we look at those skills, yes, I mean, we could look at them and pull them apart and say, well, this one should be in and this one should be out. I think we've needed to make decisions as we've gone along. And I would say this is an evolving model. It does not have to be static. We can include other things. And as the world of work changes, as employers say they would value other skills, we absolutely will kind of keep an eye on that. And so I wouldn't see this as a static product. Are all of them equally important? No, No, they will be important in different combinations. I would say it's rare that one of those future skills will be completely irrelevant to a job, but there are certain ones that are going to be a lot more important than others. And that will depend a lot on the job itself and the context that you are going in. So one of the challenges, and this is something that students will need to do, one of the challenges that students will need to do is to understand the world of work, the careers they want to go into, and therefore look at the kinds of areas that they are going to be needing to develop. So it does place some emphasis on the students. They do need to do a bit of work because it's unrealistic, I think, to have a complete understanding of every job, every employer, because again, they will vary in terms of the different emphasis they place on some of these kind of future skills. But what we do is we do provide kind of a baseline for students to start to kind of understand and say, where am I? How does this relate to the needs of the job I want and the employer that I want to go for?
Thank you so much. And when would you introduce the future skills assessment to students? Is there a certain time in their studies that you should introduce it to them?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that the earlier we do this, the better, within reason. I've worked a lot in higher education with career services, and time again, we hear the stories of students who pretty much don't touch on the career service until they finished their final exam and are now going, oh, what am I going to do in a few weeks' time? Obviously, we need to get students kind of settled in, underway with their academic studies. But to me, the earlier we can introduce these, the better. So, over a 3-year course, if it were down to me, I would absolutely be saying this whole concept needs to be introduced to people within their first year of their academic study. And it needs to be revisited to make sure that their motivation and engagement to develop their soft skills alongside their academic knowledge is kept up throughout the course of their studies.
Great. And aren't you afraid that poor feedback from the future skills assessment could demoralize students? Aren't you afraid for that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think we've been quite careful in terms of how we put the wording of the assessment. And students will come out with a profile. I mean, the screenshots that I was showing you were just dummy screenshots where someone's just gone through and just clicked the buttons to get some data up. So you will see a profile. Students will have some areas where they're stronger and some areas where they're weaker. And ideally, leading back to the previous point, Paul, ideally when the future skills assessment is introduced to students, it's not done in a way that just says, here's a link, go off and do it. It's done through a proper introduction to say, here's something about the world of work and careers and employability. Here's what we need you to be thinking about, and here's a tool that you can use to do that. And through that introduction, we help students understand that there will be areas that they can shine in. There will be areas they're going to find more of a challenge, but part of the process, like the academic learning, you don't join a higher education institution because you know everything and you can sit the final exam straight away. And a similar sort of principle, I think, needs to apply with the future skills assessment. You go on and you take some of the assessments and it gives you a baseline, but there are all these developmental tips and there are all of these courses you can access. So absolutely, you can grow the soft skills in the same way as you're going to be growing your academic knowledge throughout your higher education career.
Thank you so much, Angus. We've come to the end of your session. So thank you again for the presentation and the answers to your question. To everyone, if you have more questions, feel free to send an email in the email address that I've been shared before. Let me actually share my screen again so I can show it to you again. I also like to welcome you, of course, to any of the other sessions that we're gonna provide later today. Please visit the website of the session. There you can subscribe, and for each of the sessions you have to use the separate link in order to participate in these. So you cannot use the same link you use for this session. You have to use one of the others. That's it. Thank you so much again for joining here. Please grab a good cup of coffee or tea or orange juice. And I hope to see you all back in 15 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.